Hi, this is James Tynion IV, and I love the Drake.
You don't like the Drake?
I hate the Drake.
I love the Drake.
How could you not like the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
The Drake is good. You like the Drake? I love the Drake.
What about the Drake? Oh, screw the Drake. I love the Drake.
Hello everyone, welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast. This podcast will take a chronological look at the third Robin, Tim Drake. We will be looking at the classic 90s 2000 Robin series and other notable comics with Tim in that era, while also simultaneously taking a look at Tim in the modern era as Red Robin in the pages of DC Comics, plus other Robin and Batman happenings in the world. So sit back, relax, and find out why everyone loves the Drake.
Good for them. Love the Drake.
Got to love the Drake.
I'm impressed. What can I say? I'm irresistible.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Robin Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. I'm your host, Rob Myers, and we've got a special episode of the show. I've been really coy on Twitter of like, hey, doing hashtag the fourth to put a picture of the Roman numeral 4. So I think people figured out right away that, and it was dumb luck that we were going to be able to get the James Tynion interview that you're going to hear in just a second, kind of wrapping up not only his run, but our radio drama. So I think it all kind of fit in really nice. So Ryan is off celebrating Ernest P. Worrell today. So we needed a heavy hitter for the show, and we had just done, if you haven't listened to it, go check Batman on Film. That's episode 117 of our discussion on James's whole Detective Comics run, and it was Terence and I's first chance to get to talk to Peter. So Peter Verra is joining us on the show, his first time on Robin Everyone Loves the Drake. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, guys. It's awesome to finally make the cut and make the Drake podcast. This is a pretty intense feeling.
Cool. And of course, we've got Terence with us. How are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good. And just for those of you listening, this is out of order. So we've just recorded about a 90-minute conversation with James Tynion IV. And so now we're recording the intro after the fact because we don't want to do this all with him just sitting there tapping his fingers like, guys, I am the guest here, But I think at some point in the very beginning, Rob shut his microphone off and yelled to his wife, honey, the slush fund we've been saving for the lawyer we can now spend on a vacation. Not only are you going to be sued, but I could imagine the smile on your face was about 8 miles wide from like Toledo all the way to Cincinnati when he said not only had he listened to the radio drama, but that I think he used an expletive and said it was bleeping awesome.
Yeah.
So how great did that make you feel, Rob?
That was pretty cool to hear him say, I thought I would listen to a little bit of it, and an hour later, because what I had done is I had sent him everything minus the just the audio drama itself. I think it runs like an hour and 15, 20 minutes or something like that. So I sent it to him just like that as a whole thing, and I didn't hear anything for almost a month. And I was like, well, I'm sure he's busy, or he's writing stuff like, DC, we've got to sue this guy in Mount Blanchard, Ohio. So that was pretty cool to hear him say that he liked it and that it had turned out well. So I'm almost wanting to put what he said about that in this, but I might take that excerpt when we do maybe a discussion episode of the radio drama, and that he may start to show off that way. So I'll have to see on editing.
Or you could make it your ringtone.
Yeah, that might be the new ringtone.
Right.
And then just keep having your wife call me again, call me.
Yeah. I just need to check.
I just gotta say for everybody listening, you're in for a treat. He is awesome. He was a gentleman. He was a great guy. He's a true DC fan. He knows way more than any of us do. It was almost like, like we're the one asking him the questions, but I'm like, because he knows way more than any of us. And it was just an awesome experience. So Rob, thank you so much for setting this up. And I think everybody, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the three of us aren't going to chatter any longer. Let's just get into the thing that we just finished. This is our discussion with James Tynion IV, talking about everything DC, magical, and of course, Tim Drake. So here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, Drake. Our guest today studied under Scott Snyder at Sarah Lawrence College and did an internship at DC imprint Vertigo before coming over to DC proper. He has worked with Marvel Comics, IDW, Thrillbent, Boom Studios, of which his creator-owned book, The Woods, won a 2016 GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comic Book. He has also won the 2017 Prism Award for Best Single Issue for Mainstream Publisher. The Backstage is a really cool issue if you've not checked it out. And has wrote some of the best Batman and Robin stories to date. Batman Eternal, Batman and Robin Eternal, backups for Scott Snyder's Batman. Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, how cool is that? A creepy one, The Batman Who Laughs, and many, many more. He has concluded his amazing Detective Comics run for Rebirth's Detective Comics, which this show turned a radio drama out of part of it. He has moved on to his newest endeavor, Justice League Dark. Oh, and of course, by the way, he loves the Drake, which is why he's here. Please give a warm welcome to James Tynion IV. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. That's quite the introduction.
That's where I try to pull, like, what would Kevin Smith say if he were here? So we just kind of want to chat with you for a little bit. Obviously, your love for Tim Drake, but getting a start of who James is. How did you get your start in comics, and where did the ball start rolling for you?
I mean, there are a couple answers to the question. Like I've been reading comics my entire life. Like one of my first memories actually is my dad taking me into a comic shop in New York City. I don't remember which shop, but it was like when I was like 3 years old, and I remember seeing a big cardboard cutout of Spider-Man. And it scared the crap out of me. And I had like nightmares for the next the next few months about Spider-Man. But that's really, that's also when I got my hands on the first few comics that I sure as hell couldn't read, but I definitely, or maybe I forget. I don't know when I probably couldn't read at that point, but it's like, that I would just start flipping through and I started falling in love with the characters. But it's really not, and it was really in high school, particularly, like I got super into DC Comics in the whole event cycle that started with Identity Crisis and then to Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Like I fell deep in the DC hole in that era. It also like coincided with me getting a car, so it's like I could finally drive to the comic shop rather than only visiting like once every few months. But high school was also when I found stories like Sandman and Planetary that really, because I wanted to be a writer, but and I loved comics, but that was the moment that those two concurrent things in my head like clashed together. And I said I wanted to write comics. So I went to, Sarah Lawrence College, which has a really strong writing program. And Sarah Lawrence works a little differently than other colleges. You go and do interviews with your teachers to decide whether or not you want to take the class, because it's a bunch of really small classes and all of that. And I was interviewing the different people doing the creative writing programs. And one of the teachers was this young guy in his 30s, had just written like a book of short stories, but he had also had a short story in a collection that had just come out that summer called Who Could Save Us Now, which was a bunch of like literary short fiction, but on a kind of superhero theme. So he seemed like a cool guy, and I met him, and that was Scott Snyder. It was before he had written a single comic book. And over the course of while I was in the class with him, he actually had his first, that was when Vertigo asked him to pitch something for the first time, and that was American Vampire. And so he sends me, like, we had developed a good, like, back and forth, and he sends me the rough pitch for American Vampire, and instead of being like, oh man, this is so cool, I sent him a 10-page critique of it, like, breaking down what I thought worked and what didn't work. Almost like, now, like 10 years later, he still sends me every single thing he works on. And that was the start of our working relationship. I became a writing assistant to him, like helping him out doing research and stuff, and helping on a prose project he was working on, some parts of which ended up becoming parts of The Wake and parts of Witches, actually. But that was really the kind of that was the start of that working relationship. But I was still trying to figure out, how do I get into comics itself? Because that was sort of the goal. And I mean, hanging out with Scott was great and all, but I thought that I wasn't going to have a chance to write comics for a really long time. I knew that, some people go into editorial first, and I was really enjoying working with Scott and sort of talking story like that. So I thought what I wanted was to go into editorial. So I got an internship at Vertigo at DC, and that was a huge experience for me. Vertigo was an incredibly important, it was a very important part of my upbringing and all of that. And that's sort of where it got started. But the company was sort of it was around 2010, and the company was going through changes. This is when Jeff Johns became the president, one of the Jeff Johns, Jim Lee, Dan DiDio, Trinity ascended in that, while I was there, and there were some shakeups at Vertigo. So it was one of those things. I was hoping I would get a job right out of that, and I would hopefully, become an assistant editor or something like that in Vertigo or in DCU. But that didn't end up happening, and I went off to go work in advertising for a year and a half, while still talking to Scott every single day and starting to develop my own pitches of things that I wanted to send out into the world. And in that time, Scott Snyder goes from being the wily writer of American Vampire to the writer of Detective Comics, and then they asked him to go take over Batman, big proper Batman, and then Batman goes up, big shocker, Batman #1 with him and Capullo was a big success. It was such a success that they decided they wanted to do backup stories for it. And because I'd been literally almost every single day since I was his student, we had been talking story. His schedule was too jam-packed. He was working on American Vampire, one of the American Vampire miniseries, Swamp Thing, and Batman all at the same time. So he couldn't do 8 extra pages a month. So he gave me a call and said, James, I can't do this alone. Would you co-write these with me? And that is the long story of how my first published comic was Batman #8 of the New 52.
And those that's great. Were great.
Well, thank you so much. I worked through it that was sort of grad school for me. Trying to figure out how to go from little things that I had only ever written for myself to all of a sudden okay, this is going to have a huge audience, and people are going to know, if I screw this up, people are reading Scott Snyder's Batman, and if all of a sudden there are some really crappy backup stories, they're going to know that's my fault, and I'm never going to work in this industry. So that's really, that's when I started kicking my ass. And, and Scott was a huge help, of course. We worked very, very closely on those backup stories, and we continue to work very closely to this day. I was on the phone with him for an hour around noon today. So yeah.
That's great. So James, what's it about Tim Drake? Your first exposure to the character. What drew you to Drake as opposed to a Dick Grayson or even Jason Todd as Robin? What was it about this particular Robin that really caught your eye and really inspired you to write just a great story about him?
It's interesting because I know he's a character that obviously was, had huge presence in the 90s and showed up in all these different stories. But my first real dose of him was actually in the Young Justice Sins of Youth crossover, which I picked up as a trade, at my local Borders books, probably some point in middle school, late middle school, probably.
So what year are we talking?
Grade. When would that have been?
I'm looking at it.
That would have been around, right around 2000, 2001.
Yeah. Okay. Sins of the Youth came out May 2000, is what it says on the app.
So yeah, that makes sense. That would be, so it would have been not when it was hot off the presses, but later that same year that I got my hands on that trade. And it was really the issue in there that really stood out to me was the Chuck Dixon part of the crossover, which was an issue of Robin itself, which was in which we saw like Robin was all of a sudden aged up to Batman, and Batman was aged down to be like, you know, a very grumpy teenager in a way that, like, honestly, like, I know it's not a direct like influence on Tynion, but it's like you can see elements of Tynion in that grumpy little Bruce even now. I just reread that the other day, and it's still like there's some really good stuff. It's a crazy crossover. I don't like the fact that it was some of my first like mainline continuity DC Universe stuff is like, it's amazing that I hung on. Yeah. But I was an X-Men kid, so it's like I was used to trying to take all of the weird threads of like continuity that you would get little hints of, and I liked trying to put it all together, which, you know, I think you can still see me the act of me trying to put strange bits of continuity together in my run. But yeah, that's really where it started. But it was like Tim was like, at that moment, he and Bruce were fighting, and it was interesting because I'd never read a story before, seen Batman in the context of like this young character who was like kind of disappointed in and apprehensive of his relationship with Batman. And it was an interesting dynamic. I was a moody, like young teenager. And it's just like, that really spoke to me. And then it was just like, but then with his friends, he was this like much happier, like much more together character, who was a leader. And it was just like, you know, being kind of like moody and apprehensive around your parents, but then really like coming into yourself around your friends. That was something I immediately like, you know, connected to. And I started hunting down all of the Young Justice comics I could find. And it took me a long time to like read the whole run, because at that point I didn't, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I can't fully comprehend it now, but it's like, you don't fully understand like what order in which comics come in. You're just like, right. All right,
you're just picking up back issues.
Exactly. And it's just like, if it has Young Justice on the cover, I will have it and I will read it and I will try to put them in order and try to make sense of it. But it's just like, over here we've got Slobo and Empress, and over here, like, we've got stories about them meeting Secret for the first time. And it's just like, I don't know, how do you get from point A to point B, like, or more, how do you get from point, like, E to point, like G? But it's like, you know, but that's sometimes that's the fun of comics too. It is sort of, what is the world you start building in your head around that? And so from that, I started hunting down the Dixon Robin series and Batman stories in general, and started, rather than just reading like stories, started reading what was happening in the moment. And that was the Rucka Brubaker era of Batman and Detective Comics, like right post No Man's Land. So I was collecting bits and pieces of No Man's Land, but right after that was when I was really like actively digging in, and then that gave way into the Hush era and all of that. So it was all of those pieces. Like, it was that era of Bat Family, in particular, the post No Man's Land, Cassandra,
late 90s, early 2000s.
Exactly. Like, Oracle as a real connecting force, the Birds of Prey active in the Clock Tower, Batman kind of being, you know, a jerk to everyone, and the family kind of coming together in spite of that. But it was that family of characters and that real era that, you know, that gave me my love of Gotham.
So how did that era of Bat Family eventually transcend into your run in Detective? Like, how did you get? You were obviously inspired by this large group ensemble in Gotham, and then for you to create a great long run using an unusual team that we really wouldn't expect in a modern Bat Family. So how did you really choose your players in your game?
Well, part of it was there were elements that I was trying to build towards for a long time. I loved the character of Stephanie Brown, particularly her relationship to Cassandra Cain and Tim. So we had reintroduced her in the first Batman Eternal. And then she had shown up, like, you know, maybe in one or two other small places after Batman Eternal. But it wasn't until Batman and Robin Eternal that we picked her back up. and then it was just like, okay, I want to tell the story that I've been trying to set up in each of these things. And then in Batman and Robin Eternal, we finally did the thing, like, in the first version of the first Batman Eternal, I also wanted to introduce Cassandra Cain, and it was sort of a, like, it was still so early on in the New 52, and it was just like, you can't, part of what they had tried to do in the New 52 is make the whole line accessible to new readers, and so the idea of, like, all of a sudden, like, hey, we're going from a small Bat family to there are 20 members of the Bat family. Like, they didn't want to go to 0 to, like, 20 overnight. And I understood that, but I definitely kept pushing. So, I mean, it started with, I wanted to write Tim. I always wanted to write Tim. Like, I got every opportunity I could write Tim, I did. The first time I got to write him was the Batman number 0, that came out in the backup story. I did a backup story that basically had each of the Robins and Barbara Gordon. The first time it's where they all were with the first night the bat signal went off in Gotham, and it was just like, that was my first attempt to write the characters as I saw them.
And that was the where he busts these. Not principal, but the dean for the grades and everything like that. Am I remembering that story correct? All right, cool.
Yes, exactly. And it was sort of, I wanted to sort of show, like, just a little touch of, like, yes, they all have the elements of their character, who they are before that moment. But, I mean, I really wanted to write Tim. I really wanted to write Cass and Steph. Batwoman was someone who actually came into the process a little later, but and honestly, that really opened the book up to me.
Really?
Because she was a character who, like, in the early drafts of what I was pitching, the character I had wanted to use in the role that she would ultimately assume was going to be Jason Todd. But Jason Todd was going to be running around in his own book and all of that. And one of the real goals of the series was, I did not want this to be the second most important book for any of the characters in the book. I did not want something where it's just like, there is no tension because, like, if Dick Grayson had been in the book, he would have been in Titans, Nightwing, and Detective Comics. And that, like, the most important thing that's going to happen to Dick Grayson isn't going to happen in Detective Comics. It's going to happen solo title or the title that the team that he runs. Like, so there were lots of things like that. That's why a lot of the core Bat family characters weren't a part of the team. But Batwoman is also a character who I really, really love, and being able to tap into, I needed an ideological opposite to Tim, like, in relationship to Bruce. And that's really where she came into her own, and everything I wanted to do with Colony and a kind of militarized concept of Batman, which made perfect sense because she is a militarized concept of Batman. And, like, all of those elements sort of came together and coalesced into the sort of heart of the team. And then the character on top of that was Clayface, which started out as everyone at DC kind of pointed out, hey, James, you have a team that is full of all of these street-level ninja characters who, like, they all have the same power set, and they also look, like, if you do a lineup of them, they're all going to look fairly similar on a cover. You need someone on a team who, like, shakes up the silhouette of the team. So if you see just the silhouette of them, you understand this is the superhero team that's coming. And the character who, like, made the most sense to me in that mold was Clayface. The other character I considered was Man-Bat, and that character I'm finally getting around to do the stuff that I came up with, like, a few years ago with Man-Bat over on Justice League Dark. But
I love the Clayface stuff. It's great.
Thank you so much. Honestly, he was a huge surprise to me. Like, I thought he was going to be a bit more of the comic relief. I didn't see him as the heart of the book, and then he became the heart of the book. And
the annual was tremendous.
Thank you.
I I mean, it was breathtaking reading it and then seeing the artwork that involved with it. I mean, there were parts that looked like a film strip. I mean, you guys put in an A+ effort, and it was beautiful to read it and even review it for Batman on Film. It was just a tremendous experience on my end. So it was great.
Well, thank you. Like, honestly, like Clayface, like Eddie Barrows, what he did with Clayface, I think he has drawn the definitive version of Clayface.
Oh, hands
like
down.
his version of that character. The only thing that stands close is the animated series version. He took elements from that, obviously, but he made the character very much his own, and he gave him this powerful sadness going all the way back to that first appearance. And it was like once I saw that drawn, it was just like I understood the character. Like, and it's one of those things that I needed to see that art to, like, even though I had written the scene, it was seeing how hard that hit me, and then it was just like, okay, this has more like there's more creative energy crackling around this than I was expecting, and I need to take it and harness it. Yeah.
So I had a question about just kind of your writing style, and I just absolutely loved the detective run. I can't wait for the huge omnibus and the absolute version and all that. And what blew me away in it was just how each character was so different. Like they were so true to who they were, but yet each one had their own voice and their own personality. And you know, sometimes some shows or some things that I watched, they sound great, but everyone sounds the same, or it's the same character 5 times. And this had, each character was so different. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about how you did that. And was there one character you felt changed the most from it? Because for me, I thought Stephanie Brown had the biggest difference from who she was in, say, the 90s and the 2000s to this run. She was much more independent. She was much more willing to take a stand against Batman. I really liked it. I don't know if that was a natural thing or it just kind of happened, or you really wanted to do that. In the pre-New 52, she was always trying to like catch up with Robin and be along with it. And even her death, at the end of her death, she was like, "What was I really Robin? Was I really a part of it?" And here she just doesn't care. And I just loved it. So I was just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about how you gave each character their own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little different for each of the characters. Obviously, with Tim, it was me trying to kind of tap into, like, it's something that I remember I started thinking about it this way when I first started writing Batman, where it's just like, you kind of have to imagine a kind of like plot chart where it's just like every like iteration of Batman in comics, every issue of every comic, every writer who's ever tackled him, every actor who's ever played him, every animator that's ever drawn him, somewhere at the heart of all of those different incarnations is the like hypothetical real voice of the character. Like that's the center, that's the center of the plot chart. Like that everyone is throwing darts trying to hit that center. But everyone's center is a little different based on like what are the points on that plot chart that you as an individual like matter most to you as a character. So for Batman, like Batman the Animated Series is a huge part of the voice of the character to me. Like that was like Kevin Conroy's the voice that I'm always trying to like aim for in my head. And then obviously Scott's Bruce Wayne is another, like I've worked so closely with that version of the character that's really, really close to what I'm trying to do, as well as the kind of Rucka Brubaker era. So it's like for Batman as a character, that's sort of like, that's the triangulation that I'm trying to hit when I write Batman as a character. With Tim Drake, it's a cross between the Chuck Dixon voice of Tim, the Jeff Johns Teen Titans run version of Tim, which is sort of in my head, that's the Young Justice version, even though that's where I came in. Like I feel like that character really came of age in the Jeff Johns Teen Titans run. So that's where that's a big piece of the voice for me. So it's like I'm kind of trying to aim sort of in between those two places. With each of the characters, I kind of have a piece of that, but then there's also sort of the part of myself that I'm trying to put into them, and sort of what are their core ideologies. Like Clayface is much more of a part of my own like Clayface is more like my own insecurities, like, and writing and writing those. And so is Cass in a lot of ways. Cass is the more restrained. Cass and Clayface kind of come from a similar place of depth about who they are and what their place is in the world. And it's kind of tapping into that. With Stephanie, like, you're absolutely right. I wanted to do something a little different with Stephanie. The thing that I had always taken from her stories in the past is that even though, like, yes, she kept trying to, like, you know, she was trying to join the Bat family over and over again. But the element of that I was always really drawn to is that it didn't matter if Batman said no. She was just going to do it anyway. And it's just like, that is always what really compelled me about the characters. Like everyone else in the Bat family kind of tries to ask for permission to be a part of it. There's also, I think, a strain of, honestly, the Gail Simone era Huntress in how I write. Spoiler. Like,
I can see that.
Okay. There's a kind of just like, I am going my own way here, and I'm trying to figure out what's the right answer, and I'm not sure that Batman is the right answer to how do you solve the problems of Gotham. You know, Batman, you know, that was something that I wanted all of the characters to kind of grapple with. And you have, like, and there's the sort of Tim spectrum that I kind of created in the book, even though there's never a scene where I wanted to do a scene with all three of them together. But, like, there is, like, with Ulysses Armstrong, there is this kind of, like, totally amoral, like, militaristic version of Tim's worldview. And then Anarchy is the exact polar opposite of, like, on the Tim spectrum of Ulysses, which is it's the anarchic worldview. It is the idea that it's just like the systems are what create the problem, and Ulysses is people are who creates the problem, and Tim is the kind of tug of war between those two positions and trying to find a kind of balance between them. And it was interesting to me to kind of have Steph flirt with the extreme, because that is, like, I think that's a natural thing that young people do, are sort of like, okay, I need to look at this ideology and, like, take it to its extreme to see whether or not it fits me. And even though I think a lot of times it doesn't, it teaches you more about yourself. So I knew I needed to take her on that journey. Like, that is one thread that there are a couple of stories I didn't get to in my run that would have continued on that thread, but it just, like, they didn't make sense in the long run. I don't know. I appreciate you saying that. She's a character I really have a lot of feelings about.
It's my favorite version of her. Like, I consider it the definitive version. Just seeing her so strong-willed and just, like, she doesn't take anything from anyone. She just did what she wanted, and then to see it all pay off at the end, where, you know, she looks up and she's like, "I was a Robin." It was great. It really was. I can't compliment you enough.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, all the characters were so great, and the interactions between Cass and Clayface, and when you, I guess, spoilers here, quote unquote, think Clayface is dead or he's dead. It ripped your heart out seeing her reaction to what happened to Clayface. It was just amazing writing and artwork to go hand in hand with it. It was just fabulous.
Thank you. No, and I mean, the artwork is, like, I really lucked out. I worked with some of the best artists in the industry on these, like, particularly Eddie and Alvaro, who I'm dragging over to do Justice League Dark with me after his incredible work on this series.
What's it like working with a large group of artists that seems to rotate on one book?
It's one of those things where, like, there is a strength that comes with working with an artist for a long period of time. It's why I was really glad I was able to get Alvaro to do the entire Intelligence arc. That arc, like, I think really needed a kind of, you know, unity, and then you develop a shorthand with an artist, you can really build something. But it's when you're doing something with, like, a large cast of characters, it's like you kind of see, like, okay, here's who that artist draws, like, it really gets to the heart of, and you can kind of cater to that. There are definitely artists who are much better at the, like, you know, emotional scenes, and they're their action is not their strongest suit. And then there are the artists who the action is their absolute strongest suit, but like it would be wasted to use them on 5 pages of people talking to each other. Like, and it's sort of, you have to kind of be flexible, like understanding like, okay, like how do I keep the tone of the story, even though we're going to kind of jump around? And I mean, like, part of it is it's the necessary evil of the double shift schedule. You know, when the book's coming out that quickly, you need lots of artists in the wings, and you just have to constantly be knocking these issues out.
Did you ever feel the pressure of the schedule? Did that ever come into play? Where, I mean, you're shipping a huge book out twice a month. I mean, I'm sure that takes its toll on you.
Right when I was working on all of the metal tie-ins, like basically Fall of the Batman, that whole arc, that was rough, because I was having to like shift gear from like reading all of the Dark Knight tie-ins with all of the evil Batman from the Dark Multiverse, and then all of a sudden having to like completely switch the gear in my brain to like, okay,
Twisted.
now I need to write like the saddest Clayface scene that's in my heart.
That's a jump there, man. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Go from to Batman Who Laughed. Wow, dude. I don't know how you did that.
That was a wild few months, and wow. You know, that it's one of those things where there's always, it's, you know, and it's never, you're never really sure. Like, that's the weird thing about comics. Like, there are issues like, you know, and I'm not going to point to specific ones, but there are issues that I've like labored over for weeks, like just trying to polish every scene to get it right. And then it comes out and I'm just like, oh, that's a pretty okay-ish. And then there are the issues that it's just like, all right, yeah, like I've been working on all of these crazy things and I need to get this the fuck out the door tomorrow. And I need to basically sit down, chain myself to my desk, and knock out this whole script. I'm not prepared to do that, but I have to. Mm-hmm. And then some of those issues are my favorite issues I've ever written. Like, then there are other ones where it's just like it works how, you know, you imagine it, where you work really hard on one and it ends up really good, or you don't work hard enough on one and it doesn't end up as good as you want. Writing is a weird animal, and it's more about when do you tap into, like, the heart of the thing. Like, thankfully, these characters are so close to me that it's, I was able to find that heart easier than it sometimes is on other books.
You know, when you were, a big thing that kind of hit us, we were talking about this was a whole arc that kind of seemed like there were the moments that pulled your heartstrings. And I know in a previous episode, Terence thought he was going to talk me off a ledge of seeing Tim Drake die and flipping the page of going, oh, holy crap, he's still alive. And like, now what? And all those things. That's something that we've all talked about, that it's, when you're reading something that you can just tell that the writer is just totally invested in and gets it, for on our end, it just makes for such a humanity in each one of these characters that they feel like they're living and breathing things. And that's kind of my weird segue to get into living and breathing things in A Lonely Place of Living. And this kind of ties into Batman Eternal a little bit. We kind of, in the New 52, kind of see, as what some of us fans were calling like Tim fake at sometimes, of, you know, it doesn't really kind of sound like Tim Drake. But in Batman Eternal, we were forever going, I think James is writing the Tim Drake and Jason beats in here. So I was kind of wondering on that. And then knowing that Tim's parents were kind of flipped, that both of his parents were alive, they're witness protection. So in like your mind, are Tim's parents still alive, or in Rebirth, is that yet to be discovered? So I just kind of want you to kind of talk on, I kind of like threw 3 questions at you there, but kind of how all that plays out.
I mean, it's hard. Like, one of those things with, like, when you're dealing with a kind of malleable continuity, it's sort of like the absolutes get a little wobbly, especially like, you know, we're back in a kind of moment right now in the post-Rebirth era of the New 52 continuity. We are now in a moment where some elements of continuity have reasserted their place. Like, Jason's origin involved him stealing the wheel off like the wheels off the Batmobile. Tim Drake's origin has reasserted itself. Like the things that are kind of the core, like we wanted to reassert the core. The interesting thing about Tim is that Tim's relationship to his parents, I don't think are as crucial to his core as they are for the other members of the Bat family.
Right.
Because his relationship with Bruce and Dick actually, like, you know, that kind of trumped the relationship with his parents. Like, when he started being Robin, his parents were alive and well, and then his mom died very short after, but then that never that didn't become, like, part of, like, that didn't really become part of the, like, major continuity. And, like, I think there was a way to kind of rectify the two parts, and I had an idea of how I was going to do it. I actually even set up the thread of where I was, like, what I was going to pull to do it, and you can see in the intelligence arc, I make a reference to the Obeah Man, which is the character involved in the original, like, in 90s continuity, that was the character who's responsible for the death of Tim's mother, and was one of the first villains that Tim had to face. So I was planting some seeds that I might have pulled there, and another writer still might, to kind of rectify the two halves. But it's one of those things where I think to reassert Tim's core, his parents, like, there's a version where you keep his parents, like, alive and in witness protection, or you reassert the old 90s continuity, and I think the character stays, I think his core stays where it is. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things we were understanding what the New 52 was about, but the core, like you said, of who Tim Drake is discovering who Batman is, and it's not like, it wasn't like, Batman tricked you, I only led you down this, you know, the path in what the New 52 was doing, but that Tim understood who Batman is and the need for a Batman and the need for a Robin. So seeing that in A Lonely Place of Living, and then finding out where Tim goes to in the Lonely Place, Lonely Place of Dying, and then going into Living, and then tying in the Jeff Johns Tim Drake Batman, was a really weird, twisted mirror of, here's all the ideologies of Tim, and then you took that and flipped it upside down and almost showing the mirror of, like, how important is Batman to you, Tim Drake? How important is Red Robin to you? So I thought that was just brilliantly done.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Like, at that moment in the story, before I had the meeting with Jeff Johns and Dan Jurgens, where we talked about the Oz effect and all of that, before that meeting, I was already trying to figure out, I need to build towards the broken version of Tim's optimism. And it was actually Jeff Johns who suggested in the meeting that version already existed. And he wrote him. And that was the Titans Tomorrow, Tim. And it was he was absolutely right. That was the character. I was trying to build a kind of surrogate for a version of the character that already existed. And it was just like, and once Jeff basically gave me the permission to tap into that run, that was great. But the thing that I immediately knew is the only thing that gives that power is reasserting the classic continuity, because it's not like there's the fact that the whole original Lonely Place, like the blueprint for Tim as a character is in the original Lonely Place of Dying, like the entire blueprint for the character. And it all comes from not just the fact that he discovers the identity he discovered the identity of Batman and Robin, like, a while before he actually does anything with that information. He just sort of did it, kind of passively in the back of his mind. But it was the moment that he realized that Batman was hurting, and that he was the only one who knew how to help him, and it was the fact that he needed a Robin. And that is when, and that's when he decided to act and set everything in motion. And he didn't want that role for himself, but because he saw the answer, and when no one else did, he saw the correct answer to the problem that no one else could see. And then when no one else would step up to fill that role, there was a part of him that needed to do that. And didn't think about, there was not a kind of selfish thought in a moment. It's just, okay, if no one else is going to do it, I need to do it. And that is also very much core to Tim's character. And it's also what creates the kind of the back and forth that I wanted, like going back in the first issue of my run, where I introduced the fact that he's considering going to Ivy University and all of that stuff. Like, all of those threads come from that piece. So even if I wasn't going to get permission to use the scenes from that bit of continuity, like, that is the beginning of Tim as a character. And thankfully, like, because this is tied to the core Rebirth, meta story that's, now culminating in Doomsday Clock, it was just like I was given a little more freedom to just be like, hey, I need the old origin back. And they gave me permission to do that. And once they gave me the permission to do that, I was just like, it's not just, I'm not just gonna, like, lightly reference it. I want to use the actual words from the words and, like, rough shapes of the images from the classic run, because it's just like, it's not that a version of this story happened. In my mind, that story happened.
James, if you could, would you give us a solo Tim Drake book? Not solo, but would you give Tim his own title, or would you be more interested in doing another volume of Batman Ninja Turtles?
Oh boy, that's a big either or. Why not both?
I feel like you left it open after your detective run. I mean, I love the Ninja Turtles books too.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's when I first heard about Volume 1, I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. This is great. And then to get a Volume 2 out of it was even better. So I was just, are there more stories to tell, even if you wanted to do both? I mean, if you don't want to do both, it's fine. But I was just curious.
Yeah. I mean, me and Freddie Williams have the idea of what we would do for a third one. Like, he's off working on, like, Injustice versus Masters of the Universe right now with Tim Seeley, and he's doing an incredible job over there on that. Like, I think when he's done, like, that conversation might pick up again. Mm-hmm. I definitely got into a huge schedule crunch when I was working on Batman Turtles 2, which is why I needed to bring in my friend Ryan Ferrier to help me with some of the dialogue, and I would want to try to make sure that on a schedule level, I was able to kind of really fully take the wheel to do a third one again. I love writing the Turtles. I love writing those characters, and we have a completely freaking insane third story concept that goes all the way back to, like, the first few pages of the first.
Oh, great.
The first crossover.
What's it like writing a story like that for the publishers? You got two different publishers. Who are you trying to please at that point? Is it difficult to juggle both of them?
I think once they saw that I was coming at the Turtles with respect and knowledge of the franchise, and I was coming at Batman with respect and knowledge of the franchise. Like, obviously they know DC knows that I know Batman, so they weren't worried about it. But at first, like, I know IDW wanted the version of the Turtles to be more in line with the continuity of their ongoing comic series, which I totally understood. But it was at a moment where, like, Shredder was dead, like, Donatello's brain was in Metalhead's body, like, it was a, like, weird moment. And then, like, our counter that kind of won that moment is, like, it was also the moment that Super Heavy was going on in the Batman books, and it's just like, if we have to strictly adhere to your continuity, then we're strictly adhering to ours, and it's going to be Jim Gordon Batman and all of that. So thankfully, they were just like, no, we want the core iconic version of the Turtles and Shredder. We want the core iconic version of Batman and his allies. And that's what really kind of, like, let us go off to the races. And honestly, the biggest note I got from Nickelodeon and IDW in the whole course of writing that series is there's a scene in, I think, the third or fourth issue where pizzas show up at Wayne Manor and Alfred answers the door and he's all grumpy about it. And Mikey slides down the rails on a skateboard and knocks into Alfred. And then, like, is grabbing a slice of pizza. And in my original version of the script, Mikey cared more about the pizza, and Nickelodeon said, like, no, Mikey loves pizza, but he would care that he just, like, knocked into somebody and hurt them. And they were right. That is a really good, like, that was a valuable character note, but that is literally the biggest, you have to change this note that I got in the writing of that series. So it was a really seamless project. But to the other half of the question you were asking about the solo Tim Drake book, there are definitely Tim Drake stories I would love to tell. Like, obviously, like, I seeded something with the Obeah Man. Like, that would be something that I would love to tap into. But in a larger sense, I kind of took Tim through a full arc of, like, what I wanted to kind of say about the character. So there are stories out there that I could see for him. He's a character I love writing, but it's like, to tell another huge story about him, I would need to, like, it's one of those things. Like, there was the story that I was sort of building in the back of my head from when I was a teenager until I finally got to start writing it. I don't have a second one of those in the back of my head, but it is a character who I love and would love to write again. And there are certainly other characters that I would love to play him off of that I didn't get a chance to. And you can take that answer for what it is. But that I would be definitely very much on board for. But there are definitely plans for Tim Drake in the DC Universe. I am not going to be the next writer of Tim Drake in the DC Universe, but I am very excited to read my favorite character as a fan again.
Oh, that's awesome. Such a tease, though. Like,
James, I love you and hate you in the same breath. No,
exactly. Yeah. And I wanted to ask, your last issue of Detective Comics was bittersweet. It was such a great final issue and capstone, but it was sad that, like, the run was coming to an end. But also, I love, like, movies or books of road books. Like, I've read Jack Kerouac I don't know how many times, and whether they're silly like Dumb and Dumber or something serious, I love a good road movie or story. And you set up these two great road stories with Tim and Stephanie heading out, and then also I wanted to talk about Clayface and Dr. October. Like, they are such an interesting pair to me. You have this transgender person who didn't feel like what they were on the inside matched what they were on the outside, so they went through the process of changing their body. But then you have Clayface, who can change his body at will into anything he wants, but yet is still at war with him on the inside. And it's such a great idea for or fertile ground for stories. I was wondering, did you have anything planned for those two characters in the future?
I definitely set that up for a reason. I can say that much. Like, that. Yeah. No, I mean, I'll just come out and say it. That is the start of something. Like, that is a thread that I definitely want to pick up, that DC is aware that I want to pick up. It is tremendous. That thread may also intersect with another thread I've left in the book, but not, I don't know. I'm trying to say things, like, in a very, like, guarded way. But it's just, like, I don't know. Like, yeah. I think if you look at where I kind of leave all of the characters, like, I think you sort of see, like, for each character, there's a kind of, like, culmination of their arc, and and then the opening to a new chapter. The one thread that I didn't resolve, the biggest core thread of the series that I did not resolve, is the thread that I played most directly with in the League of Shadows storyline with Cass. There is still a bigger story to be told out of the pages of that story, and that whole mythology, which is my Denny O'Neil kung fu history of the DC universe, is one of my favorite parts of the DC universe, from the League of Assassins to, even his work on The Question and all of that, but particularly through the character of Lady Shiva. That's a thread that I did not get to tie up, and I hope to tie up someday. So, yeah.
Something that as we were talking about our feelings of the whole series on Batman on film when we were all over there doing some stuff, is I had this vision as I was kind of like doing the radio drama and I was in it for so long, is the idea of windows that are represented in the Belfry. And I thought, am I reading too much into this? In all the different points of view, that there is a Batman and a Robin in some shape or form looking out the windows of either this is going to be our base of operations and what that future holds, and then Tim Drake and Batman are looking out the very same window. Now it's completed with Drake Batman coming back in, leaving Tim looking out the very same windows at the end of A Lonely Place of Living. Now the windows are all broken and shattered again. Was that a metaphor for kind of what I just spilled out here? if not, it was just beautifully done that there's these different windows. Even when Tim is going to fight the drones, that he's looking out the windows of the belfry, knowing that this is where the attack's going to happen. He's got to hunker down. I thought that was just the artwork was beautiful, but there seems to be this overlining metaphor that's in there with the windows as well. Can you explain any bit on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the things with kind of motifs like that is they almost start off a lot of times, and I know there are the writers that they, like, you know, they say they knew it from the start, and I don't always believe them, but it's something that you start realizing that you're going to a kind of moment and creating a kind of touchstone with that is like rich with meaning, and the looking out through the Batman in the window is such a rich, it's the bat through the window. Like that is a core piece of the mythology. And the thing that the Batcave has never really had that the Belfry did have is a way of looking out on all of Gotham as it is in this moment. But it's also because it's through the lens, it's like the lens of the window is Batman. It's also what the city can be. And so it is sort of, every time that we kind of touch on that moment, it's the characters are looking through, and whether it's like the more hopeful version of what the city can be, or then the fear of what it could be, or what, you know, like dream lost and found and all of that. Like all of that was kind of yes, I was like, it was intentional touching back on that moment. But part of it is like that it all comes from that original Eddie Barrows design of the Belfry and the power of those like the huge panes of windows, like right in front of you from the start. That's really where it all began. I don't know, like that, and that's really the, you know, what I wanted to keep touching back on too. It's just like it, and it's clearly rich with a lot of meaning. Yeah, I'm sort of talking in a circle, but yes, the answer is yes.
Well, it's actually not about the run or anything specifically. A few weeks ago, maybe a few days ago on Twitter, you posted some sort of a picture of like a 2-story bookshelf. I was just wondering like how it was coming along because it looked magnificent, and I was just curious how it was, and because I even sent a picture of it to my buddy. I'm like, one day you will build this for me in my house, you know, because he's a contractor. So like, I'm stealing your idea.
Oh yeah, no, I'm incredibly proud of it. It's something that you know, my partner Sam and I just moved out to New York City from Los Angeles, and in my like, you know, big shocker, in Los Angeles you get bigger rooms and more space for stuff. Like I was living in a house out there, and now I'm back in an apartment. But thankfully my apartment has ginormous ceilings. And there is this one space that we decided to build a loft that sort of gives us a sitting area up top, and then under the loft we had them build a full like wall-to-wall bookshelf that now for the first time, like all our entire comic collection is out on display.
Amazing.
When it used to be kind of broken up into pieces, and you know, I'm gonna run out of space on these shelves so quickly it's gonna, you know, break my heart. But I don't know. I know there's like the whole plenty of people to ascribe to the like philosophy of just like needing to kind of, you know, clear out the clutter, particularly when you do a big move. But there are some books on the shelves, like, you know, back when the last issue of Detective Comics came out, I posted a picture of my copy of Kingdom Come that I bought in middle school, which was really my first DC comic. And like that thing is battered to hell. It is like, it is gone through the wars, and is like the cover's falling apart and all of it. But it's just like the fact that that's on the same shelf as a couple of stories that I wrote. It like that matters to me. You know, I build my whole library as a kind of like, it's a reference library. I go to it all the time. Like now that I'm working on Justice League Dark, I'm like revisiting every story on that shelf, that every DC comic that has anything to do with the magical side of the DC universe. I'm rereading all of Hellblazer, all of Shadowpact. I'm rereading like, you know, parts of like JSA, parts of like anything that kind of touches into even even story pieces that I'm not like specifically touching at this point, I like kind of having that full image of the world of the DC universe as it exists in my head, and I like trying to get it out there. And I also just like reading comic books. Like there's also just that part of it.
I love how you like to read it on paper and not just pull it up digitally on the computer. I like the paper so much better than the digital myself.
I agree.
Oh yeah.
Ditto.
No, I mean I could also show you like my Comixology page, which has like almost over 9,000 comics in it. Like, but
Yeah.
you know, that's for traveling.
Right.
And then there are also a few things where sometimes I'm like, I need to like read an old issue of Showcase for reference and like cross my fingers that it's up on Comixology. But yeah, I'm trying to hunt down the Showcase 82, 83, and 84, which is the first Nightmaster story with Jim Rook.
Oh wow,
Nice.
Like so, but I love that there's a kind of archaeology when you're writing like comic characters, and particularly when you're doing it in the main continuity, even though the continuity shifted and all of that. There's always something valuable going back to the stories that introduced the characters. Like I've also been rereading the George Perez Wonder Woman, which introduced a lot of the mythology that like is still there today. And it's one of those things where I'd read bits and pieces of it in the past, but I honestly I wasn't expecting it to feel so contemporary. Like I thought it would feel more dated, because it's like you go back and you read early Uncanny X-Men like Claremont and Byrne, and it's just like they're incredible stories, but they're dated. Like that story couldn't come out today. There are some of those Perez issues that feel like they have a more contemporary comic pacing that like still has all of the priorities, and I think a huge part of that is it comes from just like, you know, it's that singular vision, the fact that he was both writing and drawing it, and it's just so damn good. So I don't know. I love that part of it. Like I love DC Universe. I love comic books. So yeah. So
That's so awesome. I have a real quick question. The first victim, the victim syndicate, will we ever find out who that is, or is that designed to be kind of a mystery where it could have been anyone or anybody?
It was definitely designed to be a mystery where it could be anybody. It's something that there is value in the story that would reveal their identity, but that's almost the final, that's the final first victim story. Like this character can't really continue once you know who they are,
right? Because
that allows, once you know the original sin against the first victim, then Batman can atone for it. When the first victim represents Batman's sins against everyone who has been caught in the crossfire in his war on crime, like Batman can never atone for that, and that's the pain. That's the pain in the conflict. Like that's also why the first victim has, it's at the end of that first storyline, the first victim syndicate storyline. We say that like all distinguishing features have been burned off. And it's not clear if that's from the original, tragedy of what happened, or is that something they did to themselves? Because that's part of the horror of the character. Is this someone who had a very minor cross-in with Batman and then just went, mad with rage and then hurt themselves to make it so Batman could never know who they are? Or is this someone who was hurt, so massively that they lost their identity and are only a victim? All of those questions I wanted to kind of leave to be asked. But there is definitely value in a story that reveals their identity. It's just not a story that I was jumping to tell, because that wasn't the purpose of the story I was writing.
I think it works just so much better. I like it like the mystery like that. I kind of, you always kind of want to, peek at your Christmas present and know a little bit, but it does work so much better. I know we're hitting around the hour mark here, and we don't want to keep you too long, but I'll say my final piece, and that is I just wanted to say thank you for just a fantastic, fantastic run on Detective Comics, for bringing Tim Drake back to what he was before the New 52, both in the appearance of the costume and the core origin of the story. And it wasn't so much that I'm an old fuddy-duddy and I just like things back the way when I was a kid. Like his origin, the fact that he figured out who Batman was, rode his little bicycle out to the circus to find Dick Grayson, did all that. Like that was so much the core and the essence of who he was that when that was taken away, we really were like just kind of lost, like just dropped in the ocean of like, well, who is this guy? And now in this Red Robin costume. So I just wanted to say thank you so much and just say I've read the first 2 issues of Immortal Men and those are just fantastic. I can't wait to read more and I can't wait to start reading Justice League Dark and just seeing Swamp Thing and Detective Chimp interacting with Wonder Woman and Man-Bat and Zatanna, and it's just I just can't wait. It's going to be so awesome. So just thank you so much.
Thank you. Seriously, I really appreciate it, and I love these characters in this world, and the fact that you guys get what I'm going for, that I'm tapping into, like, because what I'm doing on some level is selfish. I'm like taking all my toys and playing with them how I want to play with them. And the fact that other people respond to it and like, it means that I'm doing something right. And, with everything I'm doing in the next year, like in the Justice League group, like, and what we're doing in general with the DCU at large, I really, really hope everyone, I hope you all really enjoy it because we are having an absolute blast.
That's cool that you said toys. I spent yesterday driving all over creation trying to get Mattel's Clayface wave so I can build my own personal massive Clayface. I'm looking at Batwoman and Martian Manhunter and Superman going, I just need Jessica Cruz and Two-Face. What does that mean for you that you are writing this and then some knucklehead in Ohio made a radio drama, but more importantly, there's a toy company making action figures of your toys, and I'm constantly going, where's the Red Robin, statue from this? Where's the Eddie Burroughs action figure? I don't know if you could kind of talk on that. Was that just something Mattel just did, or did you kind of have to say, oh yeah, do this, that, or the other?
I definitely didn't have input, but I was thrilled when I saw it. And I did the exact same thing you did. I go to a lot of conventions, so it was my project at the last, all of the conventions for the last few months. I would go and I would come back with, the first 2 I got were Batwoman and Jessica Cruz. And then I got my hands on the Two-Face and the Martian Manhunter. And then just a week and a half ago, I was at, where was I? I was in Phoenix at Phoenix Fan Fest, and I picked up the Superman piece, and I finally snapped that final arm in place. And I have the Clayface animated series figure. I have the Lego Clayface, and now I have the Clayface that is the Eddie Barrows Clayface from my run, and it's they're all hanging out together.
Clayface party.
Oh yeah, no, but seriously, I would love to get the Double R Red Robin costume figure. That would be frankly, I would even settle for a more contemporary version of the classic 90s Robin costume, because there isn't a great figure. There's the one Teen Titans figure that they made of that from the DC Direct line.
I've got that one.
Which I'm still looking for that one. I need to pick that one up. I held off for so long on letting myself buy too many toys, and then the Batman animated series line that started coming out just broke me as a human being. And now I'm just gathering everyone up. And now that I've started I also just love the kind of Comic-Con archaeology of going out and going to all of the different toy booths and be all right, what do you got? What do you got? You got the good stuff over here. And I already have a few Zatanna figures. I'm building. So now I'm also building up my Justice League Dark run. But
great.
I don't think there's a Detective Chimp out there. So I need to hunt. I need to figure out whose arm I've got to twist internally to get a Detective Chimp figure and give him a sword. That's my goal.
There you go.
Yeah.
James, I was just curious. Have you seen Batman Ninja yet? And if you have, what did you think of the way the Robins were portrayed?
I saw Batman Ninja, and it is the craziest thing I have ever seen. And for the first half, I thought I hated it. and then like and then all of a sudden a giant robot made out of monkeys started fighting giant robots made out of like cities, and it was just like, no, this is the best thing ever. It's a completely lunatic story, but it's like, I love, like, I mean, it's like, it's a kind of remix of all Batman elements, like with a kind of, you know, just that excessive anime, like quality of just like anime action stories. And I know that the stories are different, are a little different if you watch the subtitle version. I've only watched the version with English voices, so at some point I'll go back and give it a second go. But it's just like, it is a wild story. Like, I mean, the Robins are definitely not like that version of Tynion is not like, there's the fact that he loves animals. That has always been a part of Tynion, but otherwise he's more just like a nice teenage boy, and that's not Tynion.
No.
But at the same time, like, it all works in the context of what it is, and what it is just like a crazy, crazy story that I was like sitting down on, like, Sam put it on, and I was like working on my computer and was like, wait, what did they just say? What did they just do? And then like a little bit in, I was just like, I closed my computer and it's like, I can't focus on anything but this, because I think I'm going insane. And then that giant, like, Red Hood, like, the painted sequence with Red Hood, and, like, that was the moment where it was just like,
that was intense.
I just need to get, like, let go of, like, anything. And then finding out that it was, like, Buster Bluth doing the voice of the Joker in it, and I'm like, I don't understand anything about the universe, but I'm happy that it made this.
Yeah. Well, James, we want to say a big thank you for coming on the show, and a big thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to doing. This is where we would do our plugs. So I don't think you have anything left going on, right, James? You're not busy doing anything else. Of course, you're doing Justice League Dark. I know you can only say a very little bit, but is there anything you just kind of want to let the fans know that Justice League Dark is going to be doing, or what the thesis would be for Justice League Dark?
The original owners of Magic are coming back, and they're angry. So stay tuned. This is a love letter to the entire magical DC universe. It's all of the characters that I've loved. Next to Gotham, like, the magical corner of the DCU is the corner I'm really, really passionate about. And there really isn't any corner of the magical DC universe that they're not letting me touch. So, it's a big story what we're telling. Like, I know people have questions. Why is Wonder Woman at the heart of it? Why is, like, where's John Constantine? And it's like, he's on page 6 of issue 1. Don't worry. But this is me trying to tell an epic spanning the entire magical DC universe in the same way that I did a story spanning the whole Batman universe and Detective. So I really, really hope people enjoy reading it as much as I enjoy writing it. And the work on it by Alvaro Martinez, Raul Fernandez, and Brad Anderson is some of the best. Like every day when I get in pages, I immediately start messaging my friends Josh Williamson and Steve Orlando and Scott. I start sending them to them, and it's just they're always like, damn you. I'm I'm never letting go of Alvaro. You can't have him. He's too perfect. But yeah, so just wait and see. If you've ever liked the magical DC universe, you're going to love this. This is a big horror story. Yeah, and if you haven't, this will hopefully be the story that makes you love it as much as I do.
Awesome. Very cool.
Great.
Well, James, again, thank you very much. All right, that's the conclusion of episode 75. I can't believe we're at 75 episodes now. There were a couple times, I think, Peter, you had said this too, of I had notes written and I would just kind of get lost in listening to him say, and he was just dropping so much knowledge. Yeah. But on top of that, there was reverence for these characters. You can tell it wasn't an assignment that's I'm writing these characters. He wasn't phoning it in. You could still tell there were still stories he wanted to tell. So I just kind of want to get your guys' thoughts just on James talking with us, and just kind of what you thought about just him as a writer and a person. Let's start with Peter.
It's just great because it seems like it was just easy. It was just fluid conversation, and you could just tell like this was all passion piece for him. Like he loves, spoiler, Tim Drake, Cassandra. I mean, even just through the interview, you found out how much he loves Clayface. Mm-hmm. So it was just a real pleasure. Just like he gets it. Like this is like you said, it's not something that was thrown at him and he had to do it. This is something he wanted to do, and you could just tell by how he crafted the story and how much like love, and you could just see it in the pages. And I just appreciate how well he took care of our characters coming out of what was the New 52 and now into Rebirth, and just reestablish everything. And I just thought it was great. He was a great guy, and it was just like talking to your buddy at the bar.
Yeah.
It was just fun.
I think that was the biggest takeaway I had. It wasn't like where we were talking to Chuck Dixon. I didn't have that same feeling. I felt like I was talking to me like my grandfather. Not that we didn't need to give James respect, but I felt like this is a guy we were sitting at a bar, we were having a beer with, and could just sit back and laugh and talk with. So yeah, that's really cool. What do you got, Terence?
Yeah, my big takeaways were when he mentioned Doomsday Clock with Tim Drake, and to think, oh my gosh, what is coming? And when he talked about the meeting that he had with Jeff Johns, and I'm like, oh, to have been a fly on the wall and hear that conversation. Like, please tell me somebody had a tape recorder going for that one, because oh man, that was so cool. And what I couldn't believe is that he had said that his first job writing comics was the backup story for Batman #8, which was a Court of the Owls. Like, who does that? Like, unless you're like a famous writer of novels or something, that your first story is boom in the biggest book in the world at that time. I mean, Batman #8, the New 52 was off the charts. Marvel was and Image were not doing so well at that time. That was the biggest book in the world, and he's writing for that as his first book. Like, that's just crazy. I thought he was going to say he wrote some independent comics or wrote some stuff for Vertigo before, and that blew me away. And I mean, he definitely rose to the challenge, because that stuff, it was like the fall of the House of Wayne with the backstory and everything was so good. So I mean, it's just I just feel like there's this core of DC talent right now between Jeff Johns and Scott Snyder and him that have just kind of taken over and really get the characters, get what's going on, know how to craft great stories. And it's not about like, hey, how many gimmicky covers can we sell this month, and how many titles can we fit Batman in so that we can raise sales. It's really about telling great stories with all the whole DC universe. And oh man, I can't wait for Justice League Dark. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
That was the one. I think he was talking to me, or as he was saying, if this is your first time in with the magical side of things, that's kind of where I was. I'm like, oh, I like the magical characters, but it wasn't something that I was going to go, yeah, I'm definitely going to read this book. It was something I never really read. And because of his writing in this, and then reading his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and reading The Woods and different things that he's written like after the fact, like I'm all on board. So I'm the perfect clean slate of like, I've never really read much Swamp Thing or Constantine. I know who Detective Chimp is. That's about it. So I'm that perfect canvas of like, show me what this is all about. So if he has that much reverence, and I know the ins and outs of Tim Drake, and he knows the ins and outs of Tim Drake, and this is the same guy that's going to know the ins and outs of Detective Chimp, I'm like, I'm a clean slate, dude. Whatever you've got to show me. So that's really cool. And the other interesting thing, that his first introduction to Tim Drake wasn't, A Lonely Place of Living. It wasn't Batman Year 3. It was in the middle of a Young Justice run of Sins of the Father that is, or was it Sins of the Father? I'm blanking on it. Sins of the Youth, where it's in the middle of the Jeff Johns run, and it's an alternate weird timeline where Tim Drake's the older one and Bruce Wayne's younger, that he finds Tim Drake in that, and then finds a love and affinity for the character, and then goes backwards. That's typical. Every comic is somebody's first comic, that he found love for the character in the most craziest, zaniest story that you possibly could. I think that says a lot about James as a writer, and just how much he really loves this character.
And I love too that they're heavily influenced by the animated universe.
Yeah.
He talked about Kevin Conroy being the voice of his Batman. And if you've read Scott Snyder's Justice League #1, like that's got Hawkgirl back on the team and Martian Manhunter back on the team. Like I'm really glad that they're drawing from the best parts of that Bruce Timm universe as well.
Oh, totally. So let's do some plugs here really quick on the way out. Let's go to our guest, Peter. What do you got cooking up? Where can people get a hold of you when you're not talking about Batman or when you are talking about Batman?
You could find me on Twitter at Pete Illustrated. You could find me on Instagram at Peter_Illustrated. You could check out my reviews of Detective Comics and various sorts of animated Batman films over at BatmanOnFilm.com. And feel free to just talk fun. We'll talk comics, sports, anything. I'm down to just hang out and just mess around on Twitter.
Cool. Terrence, what do you got going on?
Yeah, well, I've had like the craziest 6 to 8 weeks of just family and work and just craziness going on. So I've kind of been like a gerbil hiding under the ground or something. I don't know. Did gerbils go under the ground? Gophers go under the ground, right?
Yeah.
I learned that in Caddyshack.
Groundhogs.
Yeah,
there you
groundhog.
go.
I'm not quite sure what gerbils do, but the summer break starts for me on Wednesday.
Nice.
I have 2 teacher work days, Monday and Tuesday. So I'm planning to get a lot more stuff up on our YouTube channel, get the Batman and Robin Eternal Volume 2 podcast, some stuff going because we've recorded some stuff. We did that with Sherlock. We about Batman Ninja and stuff we got to get up there. So in the next week or 2, look for the YouTube channel and our Facebook page, and hopefully I'll be having a lot more activity on there now that I've got a little bit of free time because that family and job just gets in the way of my comic book activities. It drives me crazy. Yeah.
Right. And of course, I took a little quick brief hiatus. We were going to try and do something. We were going to try and do like a review episode or a discussion episode before the James interview. Like I said, Ryan's off doing some family activity because we're in summertime. So everything just kind of worked out that the James interview would be the next thing right after Lonely Place of Living. So we will be getting back into the 90s comic again, but maybe we might want to tip into the Young Justice, Sins of the Youth, and kind of see where James got his start from. So like Terrence said, you can find us over on Batman and Robin Eternal Volume 2 podcast once that gets up and rolling. And of course, here, and then all 3 of us have done different guest spots on Batman on Film. You can find me at DrummerRob10 at Twitter, and of course at ELTD Podcast for here.
But I just want to say, hey, Ryan, we missed your buddy. Ryan couldn't be here, like you said, because he was doing some family stuff. But, James had said he was available at this time and date, and Ryan was nice enough to just be like, hey, man, go ahead without us and go ahead and, that he knew the interview and getting that done was more important. So we just want to say, Ryan, we missed you. We wish you could have done it, but, we appreciate you just, letting us go ahead and do it without you and step aside. And I hope you had a great time at your Ernest celebration, which I didn't even know that was a thing.
No, I had no idea.
Last week, yeah.
And I can't wait to get him just back on the show just to talk about Ernest and be like, I need some information about this. You can check him out at SMB_Ryan, and he's been posting some pictures of like the cabin for Ernest Goes to Camp, and they showed the movie outside, like all these different things from Ernest. I'm like, there's a whole universe of Ernest goes to wherever.
I thought it was a joke when I first heard it.
I thought it was a joke too, and I was like, man, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
So that'll be kind of interesting to hear his experience from that. So on behalf of our guest, James Tynion IV, Peter, Ryan, who's not here, Terrence, and myself, you've been listening to the Batman universe, and more importantly, you've been listening to Robin Everyone Loves the Drake. We will see you guys on the next episode. Take care. Bye.
I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna gonna send the blood, gonna drown him out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching.
Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. This has been brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net. Tim Drake, Robin, and all Batman-related characters are under copyright of DC Comics. This podcast is solely for entertainment purposes, so no infringement is intended by this show. This show is not a good revenue stream. Actually, there's not a stream at all. All music and sound clips are under copyright by their respected copyright holders. So there should be no need to send the Penguins' lawyers after us for ill-gotten gains because there are none. You can get a hold of the show a few different ways. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can also email in at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Our Facebook page can be found at www.facebook.com/everyonelovesthedrake. And as always, you can message directly over at the BatmanUniverse.net. So email, tweet, or message us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll read your comments or responses on the show. The show you're listening to can be found a few different ways through iTunes and Windows Media, also over at our host, TVU. Leave us a review on iTunes if you listen there. It'll help spread the word of the show. Make sure you head over to the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. Thanks for listening to the show and hearing why everyone loves the Drake. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care.
I'm gonna send the blood, gonna drown him out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me.